I very rarely call Mum Norma, as she is my mum. As I reflect before my brothers and sisters speak on the legacy she left behind, I'm fully aware that none of us have any say on when we were born, who we were born to, and many other events in your life. The thing Mum did and could control was, no matter what happened to her, she dug deep from a spiritual relationship with a real God that sustained her no matter what she went through. And it was a wonderful thing to watch as a child. I'm aware of her early life. Mum was born, as you know, the 15th of January 1928. Penicillin hadn't been found by then. It was later on in the year and was only commercially available a couple of years later. There were no refrigerators. There were no fancy washing machines or cooking gadgets. And not only that, she lived with her beautiful parents in the Solomon Islands. And I can remember later on in life, one of the doctors said, "Has Mum ever smoked?" I said, I would be the first one to faint if that was ever the case. He said, "Well, she's got the early stages of emphysema." And I did mention the cookhouses in the Solomons, where the ladies obviously spent most of their time. And he said, yes, the carbon dioxide levels in a cookhouse could produce the early stages of emphysema. As my brothers and sisters this week discussed how best we could remember Mum, the biggest challenge was Mum has experienced so much, been so many places in her ministry with Dad, that it would be impossible for us to adequately tell her life story. But Glenn and Peggy sent me a photocopy of a beautiful book that they had organised for their children, where the book asks their grandmother pertinent questions and she answers. And I thought it'd be appropriate this afternoon if we heard and remembered Norma according to her own words. Grandma, when and where were you born? I was born January 15, 1928, at the Sydney Sanitarium and Hospital in Australia. My parents called me Norma Estelle Ferris. Norma sounded like my father's name, Norman, and Estelle was the name of his sister who died when she was 16. I weighed 7 pounds and 3 ounces. Grandma, did you have any brothers or sisters? I had 2 brothers, Ray Harrison Ferris and Irvin Alfred Ferris, and 1 sister, Marilyn Frances Ferris. Where did you live as a little girl, Grandma? I lived on Copiu, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. There was no schools there, and I had to do correspondence, my mother being my teacher. When staying in Australia, I attended the Windsor Public School. I felt very insecure and had to work hard at my grades. I was not very bright. What did you want to be when you grew up, Grandma? I wanted to be a nurse. Grandma, what did your mother expect you to do when at home? I was to help keep the younger children occupied and to do regular chores. She expected me to work, not just to look at things that needed to be done, but attack and accomplish, sometimes the impossible. What did your dad expect you to do? Dad told us to put family first and to consider the family up to the 42nd cousin. All were equally important to him. What did you love the most about your mother, Grandma? I loved her complete dedication to her family, which has not abated or dimmed through the years. And what about your father? I loved the tender loving care he gave to the entire family whenever they were travelling. We did a lot in awkward mission trips. What were your teenage years like, Grandma? A wonderfully exciting time spent with a group of teenage friends from the Prospect Church in Adelaide, South Australia. 4 of those years, 1940 to 1944, we had the clouds of World War II hanging over our heads. But in spite of that, we had many carefree days, swimming, hiking, biking and picnicking. Every second Saturday night we attended the Gill Social, and the alternate Saturday night we attended the newsreel. We were a close-knit group. What was the fashion rage as a teenager, Grandma? Low waistlines, padded shoulders, and large handbag. When did you start to date? 14. I met your grandfather at Avondale College the first night that I was there, when volunteers were called to help out getting tea ready. His name was Norma Crabtree, and he came off the land. His father and grandfather were farmers. When was your first date? We had a tram ride down to Sydney and a ferry across to Manly. Here, he bought me a set of gem irons. He was a dedicated Christian young man, and he was studying to be a minister, and I knew I would never marry anyone who wasn't a minister. What did he love about you? He said I always looked on the bright side of things. When did you get married? We got married January 10, 1951 at Avondale College. I wore a beautiful white lace wedding gown with a train, and we had a breakfast for 200 guests, a sit-down meal in the Avondale College dining room. And among the speeches given was from Katarungaso, who told of saving me as a child. We then moved to Avondale and rented a home. For 12 months, Grandfather studied for his theology exams. We had a rural setting in which we lived and had our own cow, all the milk we wanted, our own chickens, our own vegetable patch, and looked after 2 ready-grown children, Duke 12 and Len 10, children of missionary parents. What was your favourite hymn? Day by Day. And favourite book? The Bible. And I loved the book called The Bells of Blue Pagoda, a beautiful story of missionaries in Tibet. My favourite season is spring, and I love to holiday in the Cape, Queensland, Australia. I love Christmas time. My favourite flower is a red rose. My favourite colour, blue. My favourite dessert, mangoes. What do you treasure the most? The close relationship I enjoy with Jesus is the most important aspect of daily living. Without him, life wouldn't have no lasting value. And what I am particularly proud of is my 6 children. Your Uncle David, your Father Glenn, Uncle Wayne, Uncle Dale, Uncle Lyndon, and Auntie Linnell. As you get to know them, I know you will love them too.
None of us were expecting to be here today. We knew that this day would come, but a long way away. So it's with a sense of honour, but also sadness, that we gather together to say farewell to someone who has been a dear mother to us. If it weren't for a confident hope and secure expectations of eternal life, today would be a lot more sad than it is. I know that Mum was absolutely a close confidant, if I can call it that, confidant of God. Her journaling absolutely showed an intimacy and a closeness with God and an ability to listen to what he had to say, and she was strengthened and buoyed by that, as many folk were, because of the light that shone out of her in consequence of that. I remember as a kid, teenager, coming into the kitchen and Mum saying that a group of ladies had gathered together to hear God's voice together. I was astounded. My first question was, what does he say? And she said, well, I asked God about all of you. And, well, did he say something about all of us? She said, yes, he did. Well, what did he say about me? And I remember it vividly. And she said, God says he just loves you dearly. And the personalized nature of that struck me really vividly, deeply, and permanently. Of course, there are those who are gainsayers and said she was listening to the devil, which of course was nonsense. God is preciously kind. Her language that day, as described what he said, was consistent with that brilliantly kind God. So, Mum, I thank you for that introduction. I thank you for your life. I thank you for the intimacy that you showed us and the devotion that you had for Jesus. Today, we honour you.
Hi, my name is Glenn, and I am Norma Crabtree's second son. My earliest recollection of Mum was the joy when we were at Vatuvanu in Fiji, and early in the morning, before the sun even rose, she would take us down to the point on the little hilltop that we lived on and wait for the sun to rise, and she would have pastels and later oils that we could learn to paint as the vivid sunrise appeared before us of the bay and an island in the distance. The second memory I have is of Mum telling us how important we were to her. She told each of us that we were her most special child. And I know that for Linnell and Lyndon, Dale, Wayne, myself, and David, that is a gift that she had. She used to recite poetry to me, which gave me an interest in that, but one of her most favorite sayings was simply this: two men look out of prison bars, one sees mud, the other stars. You might not be able to control the circumstance wherein you find yourself, but you still have a choice as to where you choose to look. Do you see mud or do you see stars? She painted the stars for us, for our future. One of my last memories was the gift of buying her a complete outfit for her to wear on special occasions, the first one being my wedding with Peggy. And it always meant so much to her every time I saw her wear that dress. And it was, for a young man, just a complete joy to see the joy on her face. On behalf of all my siblings I would like to recite a song by Jason Upton, one of my favorite lyricists and songwriters. Like an unborn baby in my mother's womb, before my lungs could breathe, I was alive in you. Before my eyes were opened, before my tongue could speak, before the bond was broken between you and me, you were home to me. Like a house outside the country, like a boy out to sea, like a river going somewhere we all want to be, like a voice so familiar, like the ground beneath my feet, like the way I always knew how close you are to me. You are home to me. You are where we all come from. You are where we long to be. We've journeyed far from meeting, and we are coming home. So let our eyes be filled with wonder. Let our lives be filled with song. Let the way of Jesus lead us back to where we belong. You are home to me. I may be 69 years of age, but Mum, I'm still your little boy. Till the morning. I love you.
Hi, Mom. This is Wayne. I'm talking from the photograph that Dale took of us the last time I saw you, 2019. And if I can recollect correctly, I was giving thanks on behalf of you being the spirit of life for me. My first inkling of things heavenly were introduced by you at the kitchen table. We were all little kids. I think I may have been 4 or 5, sitting cross-legged. And you were sitting telling the story of heaven. It was such a vision. It just caught me up. I wanted part of that. Mom, there's also that story of when I was not walking with God. And I called it spiritual abuse at the time, but you walked in before you left with Dad after visiting. You poured a whole bottle of olive oil over my head. I was drenched. I never forgot about that. Because right now, as I'm looking at your face in this photograph, the joy of the Spirit of Jesus in you now fills me. And I fully expect to see you in the by and by. And I don't think that's going to be too far out. So I love you, Mom. And I'm blessed by you, and I bless your memory for my family as well. Thank you.
My earliest memories of Mum was when I was about 4 years old. Mum said I did this a lot earlier, but obviously my memory doesn't hold that well. But we'd go to bed early, and Mum would always be up at 3 o'clock in the morning and would disappear outside mostly, particularly in the islands where it was lovely and warm. And I would often follow her until she found, and this particular memory was at a beach, and I can't remember what beach it was, but there was a lot of mangrove and trees on the edge. And I saw Mum go down, find a log in which she sat, and I parked myself 20 or 30 metres behind her, observing her. By then I realised she carried a Bible and a notebook with her, and so I grabbed Dad's Bible this morning and perched myself and copied exactly what she did. And the pattern of her early morning prayers was to start with prayer. And it was interesting for me. Mum was looking after 6 boys, had a very active participation in the mission activities with Dad, particularly with the Dorcas ladies. And I noticed a visible peace that settled on her as she closed her eyes and bowed her head. And I would copy and mimic what she did. And that particular morning, as she walked back, she silently turned my Bible up the right way. I had opened it but had no idea, couldn't read. But the mimicking of a human being opening their heart to God has remained with me all my life. This was something that was a habitual practice of Mum. She'd go back home and cook bread. We always had the beautiful smell of fresh bread each morning. And this was a pattern of her life. I believe it wouldn't have mattered what Mum did in her life, but for me, the greatest gift she gave to me was the ability to find a quiet place and hear the heart of God.
The last time I was with Mum, we were sitting in the chairs by the ambulance doors, looking at her tiny flower arrangement and out the windows. We sat there for about an hour just holding hands. And towards the end, I put my head on her shoulder. When I did that, she squeezed my hand 3 times, which in Mum language was, "I love you." I squeezed her hand back 4 times. "I love you too." And then she smiled and I said, "But I love you more, Mum." Impossible. Mum, today I finally get in the last word. I love you way more.
It's a beautiful morning here down by the lake. I'm sitting on Dad's favourite seat, and I've called it Barry's seat ever since. But he used to love sitting here and looking out over that beautiful lake that we have. We're so blessed here in having this walkway around this complete lake, and it's meant so much to us. And I'd like to say to all of our 6 children this morning and their families, what a joy you have been to me down through the years. Oh, I just enjoyed so much the times when we spent together at Doomba Beach. I know I've always felt sorry for you older boys because Dad was away from home so often. But we still went to Doomba Beach and had a wonderful time there, swimming and making sand castles in the sand there. And I have such happy memories of the times we spent together. And I don't know how much longer I have here, but I do know that we have an eternity before us, and I'm looking forward to having you all there with me that day. And I know God has promised me this, because years ago he gave me a promise in Isaiah 54, I think it was 13. I will teach all your children, and great shall be their peace. And that has given me great assurance down through the years that I know you will be standing ready with me to welcome the Lord when he comes. And so I just leave you with this blessing this morning, just to let you know how special you have been to me.